It's more than the driver. It's more than the car. For Lotus F1 team, the winning edge starts with the cloud, powered by Microsoft Dynamics, Azure, and Office 365. The team can analyze and share data from over 200 sensors, working in sync to make the calls that make the difference between winning and losing. This is the Microsoft Cloud.
Hello and welcome to ZDNet Cloud TV. In this episode, we'll be looking at how cloud helps the HR department become a bigger contributor to the business. And we'll be speaking with Michael Wright, who's from Group M and his Head of Talent Acquisition for Asia Pacific. Hi Michael.
Hey,
so maybe we can start off first with telling us a bit about what your job requires you to do.
Sure. So I work as part of a fairly large talent team, and that talent team consists of professionals across all of the main disciplines and functions that exist within human resources. And also we have in each particular market we have a chief HR generalist, so a chief talent officer, as we prefer to call it, across the Asia Pacific region. So my own focus is on the talent acquisition part of that. So I'm a discipline expert, and so that means that I deal with basically everything and anything relates to recruitment and talent acquisition.
So making sure you hire the right and the best people. So how does cloud come into the picture for you?
Well, actually, cloud computing has been something that's existed in the recruiting context for quite some time. So if you look at the kind of classical applicant tracking systems, then they've been hosted external to organizations, I think, for quite some time. So for me, the two areas where we use the most software are in the areas of sourcing, which means the discovery and the attraction of talent, and then the secondary piece of that would be around selection. So that's the assessment and the data management part around to decide whether this is somebody that you would like to hire or not.
What specific applications are you using?
So for the sourcing part, we use a number of technologies. In particular, we use JobVite to engage and effectively manage talent as it comes in through the attraction part of the process. We also use a tool called Checked. Now, Checked is essentially a cloud-based tool which uses behavioral science to deliver essentially a more fact-based, predictive approach to deciding who to hire or who not to hire.
Michael, I understand you've got some proprietary software as well?
We do. One of our operating companies is a communications agency network called Mediacom. What they did was build a proprietary system from the ground up, which is not just used in this region, but actually used globally. So this system is called My360. It's a cloud-based collaboration tool that incorporates social networking, and what it essentially does is, rather than performance management becoming like a once yearly or twice yearly event, it turns it into a real-time. It basically approaches that in a real-time fashion. So what this means is that managers and their employees can obtain real-time feedback on how they're doing. So this has a really beneficial effect from the perspective of employee engagement, and it's been very, very useful.
So having this cloud platform allows more dynamic collaboration across the company.
Exactly, and the system's used for employees at all levels in any geography. So whether you're a CEO or a new starter that's just graduated, you're basically plugged into the same system and the same kind of principles apply.
So cloud has kind of paved the way for big data to help in the HR function.
Ryan, you're absolutely right. Now that we have data that lives in the cloud, it becomes a lot easier to drive insight from that data.
So what's life like before you had these applications?
So I think a lot of the time the initial drive to introduce cloud type technology into HR processes is normally about efficiency, and obviously the more efficient you are, then there's cost savings that would normally associate with that, and these efficiencies normally enable HR professionals to provide more strategic value add instead of just being involved in the tactical and operational stuff. So I think initially anyway, the driver behind that idea is just to be more efficient and more cost efficient and free up resources. But I think the next part of that story is where you kind of are able to use that data or use what you have then to make smarter decisions in the business.
So spending less time on the less mundane stuff like Excel sheets and putting your time where it's more worth it.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an example, I travel to all of our markets on a fairly frequent basis here in Asia Pacific, and I met a lovely young lady in our talent team in Indonesia, and she told me that prior to our introduction of this particular tool to facilitate and automate and enable better selection and reference checking, she told me that her full-time job was reference checking, meaning that that was all she did day in, day out, every single day, all day. So the introduction of a tool where we're able to fully automate that process and drive insights from it is from her perspective, it's had a transformational effect on her own career. So it's nice.
So what advice would you have for other HR departments looking to move more operations to the cloud? Were there any considerations you had when you were sourcing for applications?
So I think HR is a very interesting area when it comes to its journey with technology. I think HR is not necessarily known for being early adopters of any kind of technology, and as compared to perhaps like a sales or a marketing department. So I think the first piece of advice that I would give to HR professionals considering cloud technology is not to be afraid. And there's a lot of stuff out there. So try and speak to other HR people that have had successes implementing technology. And I guess aside from all the kind of rational and sensible stuff that a person might normally do, right? And probably the best advice is make sure you know exactly what kind of benefits you're hoping for and that the return on investment is easy to measure. But the whole premise of these electronic software-based systems is that it becomes a lot easier to justify the investment because they're electronically tracking everything that they touch.
How do you start the rollout for your own company? Did you start it in a small scale in one single department before rolling it out company-wide?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very diverse region, so approaching anything with a one-size-fits-all approach is simply not going to work. So I would advise anybody in a regional HR role has to be very prudent and very pragmatic in terms of considering the unique needs of each of the markets and making sure to consult with them before approaching a rollout. But certainly things that have benefited us would be celebrating the small successes that happen, forming communities, and just basic stuff like newsletters and giving recognition. So it's actually a lot of the softer stuff, nothing to do with the technology, that will contribute to a successful rollout.
Well, thanks, Michael. That's all the time we have on ZDNet Cloud TV. It was good finding out how you've been using cloud in the HR department.
All right, thanks a lot. Cheers.